All right. So thank you everyone for coming to the second Saturday session. This is the Psychology of Inkblots with Jessica Nunno. And Jessica, I'd just like you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and you can just roll on with the workshop.
Hey, yeah.
One more sec. Everyone, please turn off your microphones and put your questions in the chat. I think I won't be able to see you if you raise your hand. So that is the best way to get a question in as we're going along. Okay, so that's enough of business. Jessica, why don't you go right ahead?
Thank you guys for being here. Like Laura said, I really wasn't sure like how many people to expect to be on here. So it's really cool to see that we have a pretty big number of people on here for the workshop. So that's awesome. So to start things off, my name is Jessica, and I'll tell you guys a little bit about myself and my background and where I come from. I am a freelance illustrator and a teaching artist. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Illustration from the School of Visual Arts, and I have a lot of professional development coursework behind me in both abnormal psychology and forensic psychology. So as an illustrator, what I do is I illustrate my stories as well as other people's stories. I tend to veer very much towards the science fiction realm of things. I do a lot of creature design, monster design, characters, and in world building. I tend to make very highly detailed illustrations, and I work with really vibrant colors. So something that I get every time someone sees my work is what draws them directly in is how bright the colors are. So I do a lot of different things. You guys will notice that I'm actually here in a classroom. I'm at the Huntsville Museum of Art, so I'm actually doing this in between another workshop that I'm teaching today. I'm a contracted teacher for them, so I come in from the outside and I teach a wide variety of different classes. Today I happen to be teaching brush calligraphy, but I do a lot with teaching comics and illustration fundamentals. I teach mixed media, I teach sculpture, I teach a lot with watercolor and acrylic painting. Me personally, though, I prefer to work in marker. It's just my chosen medium. I like things that are ink related, which is how one of the ways the inkblot monsters fit into what I do. And being a teaching artist, what that means is I'm a professional full-time working artist that comes into education situations from the outside. So you have art teachers that work directly with an organization or work in a school system. As a teaching artist, my primary job is to be working as a professional artist, and I do teaching in addition. So I teach here at the museum. I teach for an organization called Arts Huntsville. They have a subsection, which is a nonprofit called the North Alabama Arts Education Collaborative. And what they do is they get grants, and those grants allow people like me and other artists to do artist in residencies, so that we could go to the schools that haven't had an art teacher in a long time, and don't have access to regular arts curriculum. So I'll come in and I'll teach art classes, and I do what's called arts integration. So I partner with the teachers to work art in with whatever subject they're currently working on. So for example, right now I am working with a 3rd grade class at a school, and they're studying Roman mythology. So what we're doing in partnership is they are creating their own Roman god or goddess, and they're learning character creation through that. And I recently did a project where it was biology based. The kids had to make a cell, both a plant animal and an animal cell. So what I did is I came in, I taught them how to do sculpture, and then we created piece by piece all of the things that were going to go into the cell. So I do a lot of stuff along those lines. I also teach private lessons and group lessons on my own outside in my studio. I have a studio at a place called Low Mill Arts and Entertainment. It's Low Mill is it's really special. It's a very, very large place, and it's basically like a mall of artists. There's over 200 working artists in the building, with 150 studios, and there's 7 different galleries there in the building. So it's a very large, very influential place around here. I actually I do a lot of gallery shows, and in 10 days I have a very large solo show opening. So I'll be showcasing a lot of my my science fiction illustrations through that. Um, so that's a little bit about where I come from and what I do. But I want to talk to you guys about like the ink blots specifically, and where those come from, and kind of the history and the psychology behind them. So to start things off, so I design what I call ink blot monsters. They're characters and creatures that, like, I define, that I create them through the use and manipulation of splattered ink. But really, that concept is a lot older. It's not a new concept. It's been used in psychology for over 100 years, and it's called klexography, which is the art of making images from ink blots. This concept, it was first pioneered by a man named Justin Kerner, and he introduced klexigraphs in a book of poetry that he created. He was a German poet. He was also a physician and a medical writer. In his poetry, it tend to lean on the side of natural phenomena, like really like deep melancholy and a lot of supernatural themes. So he incorporated like ink blocks into those things. And it was about the 1890s that klexigraphs started to be used by psychologists for evaluations. And the most famous klexigraphs are the Rorschach ink blots, which I'm sure that the majority of people have heard of. So I actually want to share with you what the Rorschach ink blots look like. So can you guys see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, so there's 10 different Rorschach ink blots. They were developed by a man named Herman Rorschach. He created a psychological test in which subjects' perceptions of the ink blots, they're recorded and analyzed using psychological interpretation and complex algorithms. The test can be used to assess a person's personality, their characteristics, and emotional functioning. So the Rorschach ink blots, they're created by dripping ink onto a piece of paper. And then what they do is they fold the paper in half to get like a smear so that it's a mirror image on both sides, which I will show you guys how to do when I actually get into demonstrating it. So really, like, how do these ink blots work? How does the Rorschach test work? Well, it's through a concept called pareidolia, which that means it's a tendency for our perception to impose meaningful visual interpretations of nebulous stimuli, or finding meaning where there really is none. So there are some examples of that like everyone is familiar with. Like we look up at the clouds and we see things in the clouds, we see images in them. We look in the tree bark and we see things in the tree bark, and all sorts of different things. We look in and we create an image based upon the patterns and stuff that we see. A really famous one is seeing the man on the moon. So, where does pareidolia come from? Well, it's believed that it was developed as a survival mechanism. So infants who smiled more, they gained the affection and the attachment of their parents, and it helped to identify things that were safe versus dangerous. And women tend to experience pareidolia more frequently due to their ability to instinctively interpret emotions. Pareidolia it's an absolutely perfectly normal thing. All humans experience it. However, and I can say that this is true, it does tend to occur in more people who are fatigued. So pareidolia, it's a form of something called apophenia, which is a more general term for interpreting patterns and meaning and meaningless things. So pareidolia is specifically visual. references. Apophenia can include both visual and auditory perceptions of things that we hear. So like hearing hidden messages in music, that comes from apophenia. So apophenia is also completely normal. However, it does have kind of like an opposite side to it. It can sometimes cause lapses in judgment and poor decision making. So humans, we love patterns. We're always looking for patterns and meaning in everything around us, but that can lead us to making predictions and seeking answers based upon unrelated events. An example would be like taking birth dates and using them to pick out lottery numbers, thinking that they'll be more lucky. And to take that further, in the mental illness schizophrenia, apophenia can be a symptom and present itself as a harmful delusion. But on the other hand, these patterns that we see are something that makes us uniquely human, and where our creativity comes from. Our ability to pull concepts from our imaginations is something that sets us apart. So it's all on a spectrum. So, the question is, what do we do with all of that information about the ink blots? Well, I'm going to show you guys how, like, I go about creating, I create monsters and creatures out of them, but a lot of people, like, they have their very own, like, interpretation of what happens with an ink blot. So I've seen them create just like abstract designs. I've seen them create characters. Everyone goes about it in a different way, which is one of the wonderful things about doing this, is because we all interpret and we put down information differently. So I'm going to turn over, actually, you know what, before I do that, I'm going to share with you guys a different screen, and I'm going to show you some of my inkblot monsters. Okay, I think all you guys can see that. This is my website, and I happen to have some of my portfolio of inkblot monsters on here. So I tend to create my monsters using like the ink as a part of the body, but I know people who will draw directly in the ink. The best way to do that actually is with gel pens. The ink's got to be dry though. And when I'm doing these, I never know what I'm going to get. I don't ever go in with a plan, unlike a lot of my other illustration work, which is very heavily planned and calculated. This allows me to have a lot more freedom. I'm using the same materials, but the process is just totally different. I can go into this, and a lot of times these end up being very emotional. They tend to be a lot of like what I'm feeling at that particular moment. This one is one of my favorites. I call it my bouncing bingo eyeballs. So this one, I was getting these ready for a show, and this one, I honestly felt like I was going absolutely crazy. I was on another gallery deadline, and that's what came out of that. So I have a personal goal when I'm creating these. I want to be able to create 1,000 different inkblot monsters and to publish a book. Currently, I'm at right around 100. I've got 100 unique ones, but I want to be able to every 100 publish a book, and then publish like a really big book when I get to 1,000.
Very interesting.
So this is like what I do. And like Laura, you were saying you had colored ink. Well, these are some examples of colored ink that I've done. I primarily like to use black, but you can absolutely use color. and they just get you, it just gets you a different result. So that's what I do. And I also wanted to show you guys a time lapse of the way I do one from start to finish. It's not a very long time lapse, but it will show you kind of like the process that I go through. Can you guys see the video on the screen?
I see an image, but it's not.
Yes, but it's not
No,
moving.
I haven't played it yet. I just want to make sure you can see.
Yes.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. All right. So that that's a time lapse of me going through my entire process of creating an inkblot monster. You can see like I had it on a clipboard. That's how I present my inkblot monsters. So I attach the paper to the clipboard and then I let the ink spray like out onto the clipboard. So it's like it expands the borders of the piece. And then clipboards are so nice and convenient because they have a hanger on them. So I can hang them really easily when I go to display them.
Oh, so you
Okay.
don't frame them. You just display them on the clipboard for.
Yeah, literally, it's just like this. This is a small one. I work in a number of different sizes. Based upon the size clipboards that I can find, but I've got small ones, I've got larger ones, and I don't have them with me, but I have 11 by 17 clipboards.
Great.
So
Very
I
cool.
mount them directly onto the clipboards. Now I have to seal them. Like I have to seal them with like a Mod Podge to keep the paper safe. But yeah, that's once they're done on there, they're completely done and they don't come off.
Cool.
Okay, so to actually make some inkblot monsters, I'm not sharing. So I have to turn my camera so that you guys can see my hands, and I'm going to show you some of my materials. Okay, so this is my web camera, and it allows me, like, I teach a lot of classes through Zoom, and this allows me to be able to turn the camera so my students can see my hands. But I want to show you some of what's going on here before I turn it a little bit back this way. So I've got a wide variety of different ink here. I've got different colors, just like what I was talking about before. You can use many different colors for this. Like there's a lot of creative freedom with it. That's one of the nice things about it, is you're not restricted. I tend to focus more on using black, and I use black to enhance the other colors that I put in, but I will mess around with colored ink too. This is acrylic ink, but it doesn't have to be acrylic that you work with. Someone stepped in and said that they were thinking about using like some more watery watercolor, and then there's also liquid watercolor. The idea is, though, you need it to be liquid and to flow. Otherwise, it's not going to like splatter the way that you want it to. But you can use India ink. I have experimented a little bit with using alcohol ink, but it tends to stain more than spread.
So why do you like the acrylic ink? Do you like it?
Because it's very dark. Like I get a really dark quality out of it. So like this is acrylic ink, and it's just so much more saturated than India ink. That's why I gravitate to it.
Someone asked, what do you think about using a very watered down acrylic paint?
You can try it. You can
Dallas.
definitely try it, because technically that's what that ink is.
Okay.
So I mean, it's acrylic ink, right? Except it's made by a company specifically to be acrylic ink. But that's essentially the concept behind that. You would just have to pre-water it down yourself, and make sure that it was like I put it in a bottle or something and make it consistent.
Mm-hmm.
So and you also use like a variety of different materials when you're doing this. The really nice thing is that it's mixed media, and you're really not bound for what you use. You definitely need a pencil though. So you need a pencil, and I use marker. These are combo markers. What you saw me use in that video though was alcohol markers, and I've got colored pencils here as well. But I've seen a lot of people use colored pencils, markers, gel pens. I don't have any with me, but gel pens work really well for working on top of the ink. You need a toothbrush. Well, you don't have to have a toothbrush, but a toothbrush is super handy because it allows you to splatter things. But the catch is you can't do it with a soft toothbrush. It won't do what you want it to do. I've tried. It needs to be a harder bristle. That way it can actually flick. You're gonna see here, like, do you see this white corrugated board that I have? This is what I call my splatter screen. I made it because when I do these, of course, ink tends to go everywhere. So it can get pretty messy. And I usually have a lot of other equipment around me. So I created this to help me prevent the ink from getting onto everything else, especially electronic equipment. So it's basically like a trifold board that you would use in like for presentations, like kids use for school, except I got a piece of corrugated plastic. That way I could have it last for longer. This is a can of compressed air, which is something I know that everyone was curious about. The compressed air is what allows me to get like you see the really fine tendrils on here? You can only get that with compressed air. Now, can you splatter this and use a straw to blow through? Absolutely. I don't actually have a straw here, but you can absolutely do that. But the thing is, you're not going to get the really fine things that come off of it. That's only the compressed air that can do that. And I keep a brush around. In that time-lapse video, you guys saw me, I dipped my brush in the ink and I added additional things to it. So sometimes I'll do that when I'm creating a monster. So generally, you really want to work in cardstock. You want to work with a thicker paper. So like this is it's a much thicker cardstock. What you see here on this clipboard, this is actually Bristol. This is Bristol paper, which is what I work on primarily. But cardstock is it's gonna hold up more, because if you think about it, you're putting a wet material on this, and it can like seep through it. But I do also have regular paper too, as I'm going to show you guys how to make a Rorschach ink blot, and it's easiest to do this on flexible paper. You're not really restricted to the type of paper you use. I would just highly recommend a thicker paper than a thinner paper. Okay. Does anyone have any questions so far?
If you have a question, please put it in the chat. No, I think we're good, Jessica.
Okay, cool. So, like I said, I'm going to show you guys how to do a couple different ways to make ink blots. The first thing I'm going to show you is how the Rorschach ink blots are made. So you're going to notice this has an eyedropper. The bottles here come with an eyedropper, but you can also use things like pipettes or just plain eyedroppers that you have. It's very helpful to have an eyedropper because it allows you to drip things. Okay. So I've got the ink on here. I'm not using, because of the fact that this is a Rorschach ink blot, I'm not going to be using the canned air for this, because that's not how they were created. But you can move the ink around. And remember, we want a mirror image. So we're going to take it and we're going to fold it in half. Oops, the ink came out onto the table. And then you get what we see as like I was saying, a Rorschach ink blot, like what I showed you guys in the pictures before. So you can see that ink is incredibly wet. I highly recommend everyone having a hair dryer. So I keep a hair dryer around. Literally the only reason that I own a hair dryer is because I want to dry my artwork quickly. So I'm not going to use it on this one, but I am going to use it on one of the next ones. I'll move this out of the way.
Jessica, do you find that the hairdryer will work like the compressed air sometimes, altering the image?
I've never actually tried it with a hair dryer like that, but it can't hurt. I mean, because it's air that's blowing.
Right. Well, so my question is, if you have it the way you like it, then if you try to use the hair dryer, will it move the ink around, or do you find that the ink kind of?
It can move the ink around, but if you hold the hair dryer, like if you want to hold the hair dryer in place, you don't want to take the hair dryer, and if you move it like this, it's going to move the ink. If you hold it and move it like this, it's going to keep the ink in place more. It's the movement of the air that's pushing the ink. So if you hold it, it'll help that more.
All right, great.
I'd also suggest not holding it too close because it will still move.
Yes, that's true. Okay, so I told you guys that I was going to show you a couple of different methods. So what I like to do, this is where the toothbrush comes in. So I drip the ink onto the toothbrush, and what I do is I scrape. And so I get a very different kind of reaction from the scraping. Now, okay, so in comparison to what I just showed you, this is the cardstock paper. The other paper I did the Rorschach ink blot on was the computer paper. And you saw the ink, it just like poured onto it and it like fell through the paper. That's why you want to use cardstock. So you can always add more, you can add drips. And you take the compressed air. And it's specifically the compressed air that gets you that particular look. And you can drip like what we did with the ink or the Rorschach ink blot. Getting ink all over everything. This is why I have the splatter shield. And the reason for the toothbrush is this. So it allows you to get like a different kind of splatter. You are going to get incredibly messy with this, which is why you should be in a controlled space. But yeah. So I purposefully brought like a blank clipboard. That way I could do this on the clipboard and you guys could see the ink spray onto it. So when you're using the compressed air, like it pushes the ink. So do you see how like some ink is thicker in certain areas now?
Yes.
That's something I specifically like. Like I like that because it adds depth to it. You can hold that further away and it won't happen quite as much. But it's kind of my personal preference to see that. Because you see here how the ink, like there's a thicker patch of ink and you can see the tendrils that moved up into the lighter patch. For me, it adds depth to it. And of course you could come in here with color. Guys, give me one quick second. I've got students waiting outside in the cold and I don't want them to be in the cold. Give me 1 second.
Thank you. So this is Laura. I was playing with the compressed air and I don't have a little one of the long little straws that she has connected to this compressed air can. It must have been lost. So it's not working as well as yours. Yeah, it kind of puts some.
I mean, you could still do it, but the straw helps.
Straw really is key to get those beautiful tendrils.
It's because it's really confining the air that's coming through it, so it is helpful. I also have like an air compressor at home, and I have done it by hooking an airbrush up to it and using the airbrush to push the air around. But I do really like the compressed air cans better. So once I have this, and okay, so the ink is pretty wet on here. Before I really start doing the pencil, I wanna blow dry it.
Do you find that they dry fairly fast?
Yes. If you use the hair dryer, yeah. All right, that is primarily dry. So once I have my ink blot on here, I just start doodling. I mean, all of us as artists, we doodle. So I would just come in and start seeing what I see. Is there anyone that's following along and doing this at the same time?
Well, I am.
Yes,
People can
Cool.
unmute yourselves and kind of chime in.
I'm
Um,
following you with
yes,
watercolor.
yes, this is Lisa. I'm doing, I had a question for you. Do you ever, you showed the Rorschach, do you fold them or did I miss something or do you not fold them in this particular thing?
In you want to do a Rorschach ink blot, you want to fold it because the idea is that it's a mirror image. What I'm doing here is definitely not Rorschach. Like I just sprayed the ink onto this, but
Okay.
there's two different ways that you can go about it. But yeah, if you want it to have the mirror image and look like a Rorschach ink blot, you do want to fold the paper.
Just a question about that. I folded it lightly, but of course now I have a fold, but then that's fine, but there is a crease.
Yeah, there is. That is one of the things about doing the Rorschach ink blots, which is one of the reasons why I don't do them quite as
Okay.
much. But what I would do is I would work around the crease and I would incorporate it in some way.
Thank you. Great idea.
You could also use the crease as part of, you could be making an accordion book or something and incorporate the creases into a book making project.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, thank you.
Which was the first thing I thought of after I did my Rorschach.
Yeah.
Well, I have all the materials out, but once I saw the spray booth, I knew I couldn't do it.
I recognize Kate.
Yes, yes. I'm at my kitchen table with all the things I need, and this is not a place where I can spray.
You do want to try to control it as
Mhm.
best as you can. Or take paper towels and lay paper towels down around this. That way, if you spray and the spray goes off, it goes onto the paper towel and it gets absorbed.
Right.
So like here, I'm at the museum, so like these tables get beat up all the time. And I'm gonna wash them like before I leave, but I always make sure that I'm in a place where I can clean it. I have never heard of the Native American technique.
So Laura, do you want to talk? Do you know a little bit about the Native American technique? Do you want to talk about it?
Yes, hold on, let me get the book. Hold on just a second. So there's this famous artist, a Native American artist who maybe a lot of people haven't heard of because, you know, Native American artists are still not in the spotlight that enough. His name is Oscar Howe. Has anybody heard of him?
No.
No, I haven't heard
Oscar,
of
well, he just came out, he just had an exhibit in New York and at the Smithsonian, a major retrospective of his work. And he works based on this thing called the point and line technique, which is a Navajo, I think. I have a book here. I don't know if you can see.
Well, you're not spotlighted. Why don't you put the book information in the chat?
Okay. And so what he does is apparently they just put like points and lines all over the picture. And then it invites kind of like a vision quest where they'll see things in the points and lines and connect the dots and the lines. So I was just saying it's another form of that. I'm very interested in projection. That's one of my main things. So that's why I was interested in going to this. And so whenever I see any method like that, it interests me.
That's like what he's doing is another method of pareidolia.
Oh, yeah.
So it's this is not the only way that like you achieve pareidolia. It's fine, like literally it's finding images, finding meaning in something that really has nothing attached to it. Like before I started putting these lines here, right? This ink blot, there was nothing there, right? This ink blot was just an ink blot with nothing to it. Now I look at the ink blot and I see personalities in them. So I'm attaching a meaning to the ink blot that really doesn't exist.
Mhm.
That's pareidolia. So when he's saying that you're finding things within the point and the line and you're creating like an image from that, it's the same exact concept.
That's what it reminded me of. And actually in my artwork, I use watercolor. And if you want to go to my name's Lord, you know, if you look at my name, go on the internet, I do the same thing, but I don't do it that consciously. I think a lot of artists do it kind of unconsciously. Am I correct? What do people think?
I think so. Laura, put your website in the chat.
Okay, sure. I'll put both, the book and the website.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So I do everything in pencil first. Because that's just my particular process. Like you don't have to start this way. When I work, I start in pencil, then I move and I fine line everything and then I color. So like this here, I would take a fine line or two. So yeah, I'd take a fine liner to this because that's my particular method. And I'd come in here and I would do what I do and I'd practice like my thin and thick lines to help give myself a depth.
Do you go back and erase the pencil later or not?
I do. I personally do. You don't have to though. I mean, it's mixed media and you can do it really in any way that you want. I go back and erase the pencil though. You can always go back in and like say you see something that you want to add to it, some sort of addition. You can use the brush. Like you can use this and you can add more to it.
Mhm.
So I'll go back in. And I'll do things like this. Oops, so you can't see that on the camera. And I purposefully use the same kind of ink to make it appear like it come from it. And I bring it up into the ink blot because of that. And then of course, once you have the ink down, you can use any material on it. So like if you wanted to watercolor this, you could watercolor it. If you wanted to use marker, you could use marker. If you wanted to use colored pencil, you could use colored pencil. You could use acrylic paint if you wanted to. Acrylic paint actually might be cool as you can bring it up into the ink a little bit because it's more opaque. But I typically use gel pens when I do that. That's just my personal method of doing this. And what I will do, I'm not going through and doing like the way I do a whole entire inkblot monster.
Right, it's just nice to see the different techniques you're using.
Yeah. And in about 10 minutes, I have to start my other class again.
So, so maybe what we can do for the last 5 minutes is go back to the little gallery, and if anyone's been doing some that they want to share or a beginning of a inkblot they're working on, we can kind of hold our.
Yeah,
hold
I
our-
would love to see like what you guys have started.
Yeah. Before we do that, does anyone, as they're watching her, have some more questions? Feels pretty
Yes.
self.
Yeah, it's honestly pretty self-explanatory. One of the things that I do, because like I said, it's mixed media. I'll come in and I will do shading like with my pencil on top of the marker.
Right. So question, Darlene wants to know, is there an easy way to wash the ink off your hands? No.
Okay, so I keep, you guys know the soap that you use to clean your brushes? Like it comes in a little like tan container,
Little
right?
tin.
And you wash it, like you put your you mix your brushes in it and then you push through the brushes.
Yeah, I don't
Right.
know the name of it, but I know what you're talking about.
Well, that same stuff comes in a bar of soap. So I personally, what I do is I never buy it in the container because the bar of soap is actually cheaper. And so I keep a bar, I don't have it on me because it's with my acrylic paints at the moment, but I keep a bar of soap and I will use that to wash my hands as well as my brushes.
Great.
And that helps.
Another question is, will sand or embossing powders stick to the ink? Do you know?
I'm honestly not sure because I've never tried it,
Okay.
but it honestly can't hurt to experiment with it. Like I would use this as an experiment and try out all different kinds of things with it. You can try out different materials, you can try out different techniques, you can try out splattering the ink in different ways. It's really super open-ended, and it's really well, I want to say that it's forgiving, but it's not really forgiving because of the fact that it's ink, and once it's down, but it forces you to use your imagination.
Hmm.
So like if you're in say you're in a creative block, you can come and you can do something like this and you can kind of push yourself out of the creative block by using the concept of pareidolia.
That's what I was just thinking, Jessica, like when people are like, I just don't know what to do anymore, just to have some fun, because the fact that it's so, you put it down, it's immediately permanent, but then you start working around it. I think it really opens up some, probably some channels in your head.
Yeah, it opens up your imagination. And honestly, like I told you guys that I do really highly detailed, tight illustrations. I'm using all the same materials, but I come here and this allows me to have freedom. Whereas the other stuff, like it takes me like 40-50 hours to finish a piece. And like I get so caught up in it. But when I come and I do this is like a time for me to play,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like it's got its own, like this is a total separate body of work for me. Like, yeah, this is a total separate body of work. But it's just a different concept.
Very good. Carol also says that baby wipes work for taking off ink. So
Yes, keeping a pack of baby wipes with you when you're doing art in general is a good idea. And when I'm teaching very young children, when I'm teaching very young children, I hand them baby wipes rather than lining them all up at the counter because that can get tedious.
All of them washing their hands.
Yeah, so baby wipes are like an essential thing.
All right. So why don't you stop your share screen, because I know you're gonna have to go off in a couple minutes. And we can go back to the gallery, and if anyone wants to, I'd love to get a screenshot with people just holding up their, I have a bunch of Rorschach ink blots. Okay, so I'm gonna remove you from the spotlight briefly. All right.
Oh yeah, those are really cool looking. And I like how some of you guys, you use the black with the colors.
Yeah.
Oh, it's,
Oh, Jenny, yours has like a really creepy monster vibe, really super creepy monster vibe. I love it. And in Ann's, I see like a weird bug creature dancing.
I didn't have black ink.
That I love the fact that it's like this bluish purple. Yeah. I see like a brain in Lisa's. Kind of
yeah.
like activity.
Can't see it.
That's because the background is blurred.
Yeah, I can't get rid of it.
Well, I keep a sign in my studio up near where my inkblot monsters are, and it's just a question. It says, what personality do you see in me? And I have found I don't attribute anything to the monsters that I make. I don't give them any sort of personality. I just let them be. And when people come into my studio and they start looking at the monsters, they will tell me that they see this, that, or the other in them, and they will give them personalities. I had one of the ones that I showed you on my website, someone attributed it to like a bad hair day. I've got another one that someone called a bookworm. And so I let all of my clients and my patrons, I let them come up with the
I'll
personality.
bring the value closer. I'll bring these values closer to the middle value. I'm going to repaint that back.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Thank
I
you.
had my participants down so I could take a picture and had to quickly put it back up to unmute, to mute. All right.
Does anyone have any questions before I end up hopping off of here?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, your work. You work in that field with like psychic help with detectives and stuff. I was always interested in possibly doing that. I was a little afraid though. What's it like working in that field?
Like, wait, say the field one more time. Like,
You said you were doing forensic stuff, or what were you doing?
I was for a little while.
I mean, I was just thinking about the psychic stuff. Is that
So
related?
there's a reason that I'm not working in forensics anymore. Like doing that kind of psychology. I was in a master's degree program for it, and I had the idea of bringing like art therapy to prisons and using it to study like the criminal mind. But I went into prison for a part of like my it was like I had to write out like final reports and projects and stuff for my master's, and I couldn't handle being in the prison. I couldn't I tend to get very bombarded with emotions, and there was so much negativity in being there, and it was just such like this massive dominating energy. I realized that I couldn't do it. That it was definitely, I did not want to go the art therapy route in that direction.
I have the same problem with art therapy.
Yeah. So now what I do is like, I teach, I told you guys I'm a teaching artist, and actually my background in psychology helps me to teach a lot. Like I teach every different age group, anywhere from pre-K to adults on a weekly basis. And knowing various different things about psychology and different techniques, it helps me to talk to the kids if they're frustrated with something. It allows me to assist them and help them work through their frustration. And I take the time to explain to them why they're frustrated and how it's actually them learning something. And once the frustration goes away, it means that their mind has made the connection and they've actually learned it. So I directly use what I did in psychology with my artwork. And a lot of my personal illustrations are based around like mental health concepts. So I like that. It just I take it and I tie it directly into what I do now.
Mhm. Yeah.
Very interesting. Well, thank you so much, Jessica, for this really interesting workshop. I think everyone had a really good time and is probably going to spend a good part of their day playing what they're
Yeah.
And
Well, I'm glad you guys hopefully enjoyed it.
and yes, okay. Did you have a quick question? I saw you raising your hand. No, oh, you're saying goodbye.
You're a great teacher, Jessica. Thank you so much. This was very opening.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
so I would just use it to honestly relax. It's something like out of the ordinary. So maybe, just have some fun and relax with it.
Very playful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. All right. Round of
Thank you,
applause,
guys.
Jessica. Have a
Thank
good day, everybody.
All right.
Bye.